Better than this, not as good as that, definitely not as good as that, about the same overall as this. The f*** were you expecting at this point? Hey, okay, spoiler-free up front, spoilers at the rear. Let's try and get this shit over with so you all know what to be mad at me about. So here's a movie that was already in production when they got the bad news that its direct predecessor, made by most of the same people and assumed to be a guaranteed success in the making, had instead opened as one of the worst reviewed films of its year, prompting a studio-wide panic and placing the rest of what was already a production state of questionable ambition in jeopardy and setting off a troubled production rumor mill that's continued to plague it to this day, most notably in the idea that what was supposed to be 2 movies and then at some point just became 1 for now, whose director stepped down from post-production owing to a tragic family loss, leading to the film being finished by another filmmaker, best known for similar features in a competing series, thus leading to further drama involving massive reshoots and more rumors of changes to tone, drastic shifts in story and pacing as its studio attempts, and in-motion course corrections. So how is it? How do you think? Okay, so the good news is it's not horrible. In fact, it's almost tempting to call it passable or inoffensive until you remember how much they spent making this thing, or if you've got any attachment to the idea that the DC superheroes are meant to be anything more meaningful than just another super team, in which case it does not deserve to pass anything, and fans especially should be plenty damn offended. Ironically, it's nowhere near as bad as Batman v Superman was, but it's also 1,000 times less interesting than that, and I guess that's a better outcome. Like, if Dawn of Justice was a cauldron of scalding hot gorilla piss, then Justice League is the same thing, but the gorilla piss is now just room temperature. So it's every bit as gross and unpleasant, and you shouldn't go near it or touch it, but if you do, it won't at least physically injure you, so I guess that's something. But for real though, at least that last dumpster fire blew itself up because it was trying and failing spectacularly to be about things like terrorism and power and hero worship and duty, sacrifice, martyrdom, whatever the hell that ending was supposed to mean. By contrast, Justice League avoids being a train wreck strictly because the train has nothing in the cargo and hardly anyone on board, and it's rolling along at about 1 mile an hour with no momentum until it hits a misshapen part of the track and just kind of stops, and there's no reason for anyone to care. In any case, our story, there's a magical cube with vaguely defined cosmic significance somewhere on Earth that an alien bad guy needs to conquer, I assume the universe, so he shows up with an army of interchangeable CGI henchmen and tries to steal it. In order to prevent this, a group of superheroes is gathered to stop him and save the world. Oh, and the villain we actually get to meet is largely implied to merely be the precursor to some grander, more powerful threat to be dealt with at some later date if the ticket sales demand so. That is also a thing that happens. And if you're thinking, hey, wait a minute, that sounds exactly like the same movie as The Avengers, well, hold your horses there, sport, because what you're missing is that in this movie, there are 3 magical cubes, so yeah. Besides, originality or lack thereof isn't really the damning issue here. Stop Steppenwolf from gathering the mother boxes is a good enough setup in theory to hang the team-up angle on, and having one be in Atlantis and the other one with the Amazons is an efficient enough excuse to give the other ladies from Wonder Woman a cameo and Aquaman a reason to show up. I mean, it tracks, right? And if the team had a good dynamic, or the actors had great chemistry, or the eventual payoff of the coming together was suitably satisfying, it wouldn't really matter why any of it had happened. Unfortunately, the thinking on the post-production side here is clearly that releasing a dud was preferable to risking another disaster, and that basically means you're watching a film where anything that wasn't a joke, an action scene, or a character striking a dramatic pose for their merchandising skills just doesn't exist. Functionally, Justice League is the cinematic equivalent of a cheap fiber supplement. It has no taste, no texture, and it's only designed to pass harmlessly through the plumbing and make you feel like you experienced something. There's zero thematic or narrative connective tissue holding anything together, the characters show up and leave, chemistry comes and goes with no rhyme or reason, motivations and attitudes change just because, and even the biggest possible plot point the film could have possibly hit, which we'll talk about in the spoilers, shows up at midpoint with no real build-up, hits the pause button, and then resolves itself with very little explanation and an absolutely staggering lack of gravitas, reduced to just another plot point to get off the checklist so we can keep this damn thing under 120 minutes. Whatever Zack Snyder originally intended Justice League to be, Warner Brothers has released in the form of a mercilessly chopped down and hilariously recolored and retouched film that lands as a nearly plotless, uninvolving highlight reel, and not even a highlight reel of the mostly one-dimensional characters as they exist in the film, but rather a collection of sizzle clips and money shots designed to say, yeah, you see what he can do? Now imagine that, but with an actual movie going on. That same apparent hatchet job post-production, seriously, I don't know the story, but if I was Joss Whedon, I wouldn't have wanted my name on this as co-director either, also manages to make it a hilariously bad-looking movie in spots, which is just nuts when you think about how much they spent. If you've seen the first wave of trailers compared to the most recent ones, you can already tell this was meant to be much more in line with Batman v Superman's palette and has been recolor graded and retouched and reshot basically into a completely different look that frankly makes it look like they were trying to ape the more Crayola-colored vibrancy of the last couple Marvel and X-Men movies, which was not a good idea with the material they had. You see, the problem is that on movies, costumes, sets, and props are designed around how they're going to be shot and lit, so the level of tampering on display here has the effect of highlighting how artificial and stagey it all looks under the wrong circumstances. There's a rooftop scene early on involving Batman that looks every bit as tacky as everything in Batman Forever 2 decades ago, and the grading and retouching is so extreme in the exterior shots, you can plainly see the texture shading on the costumes that's supposed to make them look like they have extra muscle definition, just looking like big splotches of dark paint instead. Seriously, Affleck and at least one other person look like airbrushed Power Rangers half the time. It's absurd. And then Steppenwolf, good lord, I have no idea why a villain who's just a tall guy with a stupid hat needed to be CGI, and I really don't know why he needed to be circa 2001 Mummy Returns CGI, but whenever he's on screen, the good guys in their badly lit, fake-looking costumes and the cheesy sets, it honestly looks like Warner Brothers spent $300 to $400 million to remake Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Justice League is far from the worst film I've seen all year, but that's only because it's not trying hard enough to fail hard enough. It's an infield foul in T-ball. Strictly on its own merits, it's a complete waste of your time, but as a cultural artifact, it's a waste of millions of dollars, several good actors, a bunch of intermittently good filmmakers, and the legacies of several beloved comic book characters. 1.5 stars. Yeah, I know we're all gonna go see it anyway, but there's really no reason to. Okay, so Superman comes back to life in the middle of the goddamn movie and it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's not even built up as this thing or a plan, it's just, hey, maybe the Mother Box can resurrect dead people, let's try that. He's angry for a bit, then he's not, then they contrive to hit the pause button so his whole plot line can be in stasis so he won't have to show up and save everybody until the very end of the movie. We see some random guys using Green Lantern rings in a flashback, but it doesn't mean anything or set anything up. Like everything else, there's nothing between the action beats and the exposition to give us depth, character, or even the implication of relationships between the characters to make this land. There's just nothing in here. Oh, and there's zero payoff for the time-traveling Flash or Batman's stupid nightmare from the last movie, in case you were wondering about that. Cable is still a block of wood, Gal Gadot is still fine, but there's really nothing to the character on the page this time. Affleck looks like he's literally eyeing the exit the entire time. Ray Fisher has presence, but Cyborg is a brooding bore. Flash is a whiny, annoying, weightless millennial stereotype. I just kind of wanted someone to punch him. And Aquaman is easily the worst character in the entire DC Extended Universe franchise now. I just don't understand how a dude as large and exuberant as Jason Momoa can have absolutely zero screen presence, but here we are. If you already know what certain words and symbols and insinuations mean, you might get a sense of the bigger stuff Steppenwolf is attached to, but it's very clear that any plans for Darkseid, any bigger New Gods, Fourth World stuff, any of that to be set up, got yanked out of this at whatever point they decided to scrap the whole 2 movies thing and before Batman v Superman shit the bed. The only sequel tease is a post-credits gag setting up kinda sorta the Legion of Doom, and that could really be a sequel for any of these movies. And all of it is symptomatic of this being a hacked up, compromised, mutilated, salvage job of a movie with no thematic or narrative goal beyond making whatever quick money it can and not doing any further damage while Warner Brothers decides what to do with these characters next. Yeah, fine, there's a handful of 1 or 2 minute action beats and cool posing shots that'll eventually look good in YouTube montages, but that really shouldn't be the bar, guys. I mean, we gotta have some self-respect about these things. Again, 1.5 stars, don't bother.